Job descriptions. Do you have job descriptions? I don't have a bunch of job descriptions for you. I do have a couple here that I'll just allude to. Well, actually, in your packet, there's a whole packet from a guy named Dave Chalmers, who's the committee chair in Cincinnati. And when you have a chance, look that over. It will blow your mind because that guy is so detailed and he's so passionate and he's so involved. But there might be some stuff that you could glean from the Dave Chalmers Cincinnati packet that you go, oh my gosh, this is exactly what I was hoping that we would do as a committee. But number one, just make sure you have job descriptions. You know, if you ask somebody to be a committee or a banquet chair, what is it that you're asking them to do? How do they know that they've succeeded? You know, what are they being held accountable to? You know, like whatever it is, somebody's got to take the time to write down the expectations and the job description, because the reality is you're hoping that you know, maybe 2 years later, they're not doing that job anymore, somebody else is doing it. You do the work one time. You know, I mean, we all know that it's hard up front, but once we've done it, we've really freed ourselves up in the future, and we just are tweaking a little bit. Onboarding process. How do you bring a person on committee? Do you just find a warm body and go, you want to do it? That's awesome, I'm lonely. How do you do it? Like, I'm totally serious, how do we do this?
I do it like a young life leader. I meet with them, share the vision, ask what they're passionate about, and say, will you come check it out?
Okay.
And let's talk again. And have them come to a meeting, meet with the team, be around it.
Okay, Hans, what's the rest of the committee's role in bringing a new committee person on committee? What's the committee
They might have the
chairs?
idea for the person instead of me.
Okay.
They might introduce it.
But you're the one that meets with them. You're the one that processes it, goes over job description, onboards them.
I've done it a couple times.
Okay,
We had a committee member called to recruit.
Yeah, we've had it.
okay. Okay, so it's a joint effort. Okay, it's not just the area director driving the bus. Right, okay, that's great. But anybody else, how do you do it? Because I'm guessing there's not one way to do this. How do you guys do it? Shane?
I don't think we've done it the same way twice.
Yeah.
I mean, I have a couple that's been on the committee since 1977. They're still on the committee. Falls asleep every meeting. So I don't know. There's just I've had conversations with people. I've asked people and they've said not yet, and so then you come back around and say
Yeah.
about now. And like I was saying, there's a couple people on our committee that aren't even officially, like, we never had the official, hey, you're on the committee conversation, but they've been coming to stuff. And one thing that we've been doing for the last couple of years is I have a private Facebook page that I invited a bunch of people who've just been friends of the mission or the ministry in our area to be a part. And I've asked leaders, I've given leaders kind of administrative permission to post stories and stuff. And so it's sort of like a cultivation event that just happens all the time. And my hope has been that people would kind of catch a vision for, I want to get more involved because I'm seeing this, you know, often. And so I think a couple of the folks that we've got in our committee now, maybe that has helped them along. But yeah, we don't have an official process necessarily.
Is it possible? This gets a little difficult, because is it possible that a person in a community, the area director, for instance, could meet with the person and say, "That's awesome. I'd love for you to be on committee," but that person has they're known in the community by the rest of the committee differently than the area director knows them. Could that happen, where the committee might go, oh, whoa, wait a second. I don't know if that would be the right person, because they have knowledge, whether it's professional or personal, because they've been in the community longer, that the area director doesn't have. So it seems like there has to be a process by which the committee chair and the area director are working together, maybe even the whole committee on some level. And it's something that we dealt with in Bellingham and Whatcom County, where we didn't feel it was right to vote on committee people. We felt like that was weird, and that it was just awkward, and like, okay, are we going to vote? Like,
Vote off the vote.
Yeah, we didn't feel like we were going to interview them and send them out the room, you know, and say, okay, you go out there and we'll talk about you, and then, but we did feel like there needed to be space to to actually allow people to voice any potential in an appropriate way. So what we would do is we had a job description. So to be on committee, there was the wealth, wisdom, work, and there were certain roles that were going to be committee roles. They're not helper roles. They're not setting up for the banquet, though they do include that. They're not just that, okay? They're not just showing up for one shift at the barbecue beef barn. It's not just baking one pie for whatever, you know, but the committee roles were the committee roles. They were defined, and when somebody's coming to a committee, we had a job description. We processed that with them, okay? And then if they were interested, what we would do is we would voice it to the committee. Look, this couple or this individual has shown interest. For the next week, if you have any thing you feel like you need to share, here's who you contact, the committee chair. Here's who you contact. If there's nothing in that week, then we're going to be moving forward, okay, with this. Now the individual didn't know that process was happening. Okay, we just kind of went through the first thing, and then what we would do is the first step when a person was coming on committee. Again, we had a job description. Now I don't know that we did a good job with having an exit strategy. So we could have had somebody who was on committee for, what has it been, like 40 years? That's crazy. I mean, that's awesome. That's amazing, you know, but we could end up with that. I think it's scary, my own personal opinion, and I think you would agree, it's scary to enter into a committee role if you don't know what's expected of you and you don't know how long it's supposed to last. I mean, I'm not sure why you would throw yourself into that other than just, I love these people and I love Jesus and I'm passionate about the end result of what's happening here. But the reality is we might want to think about not only the job description and not only the process of how they're coming on board, and I think Jeff could lend some great guidance into this because regions could, you know, be giving different guidance, but also what's the exit strategy? You know, like when a person comes on, are we saying, hey, we want a 2-year minimum, like most leaders are asked, or is it a 3-year minimum, and why? And then at that point, we're going to reevaluate. Or, you know, there are some boards and committees out there in the world that say, look, you can be on here for 5 years and you're done. It doesn't matter what's going on, you're off and you need to replace yourself, or we're going to be in a process of replacing you. So it's just food for thought. You know, as we're thinking about structure and roles and the dynamics of growing, it's not just about brainstorming where are the people and who are the people and cultivation events and let's just fill the fishing boat up. But we've got to have those roles set out, and we've got to have some expectations and a sense of, you know, how long is this going to last? I mean, I think if we beat people to the punch, we look more professional, you know, and people will respond better to that, in my opinion, of going, oh, you've already thought through this. And even if we could go so far as to say, what's the cost of being on committee? You know, I mean, we can't determine what their giving is, but do we have an expectation that you support financially? And then is there any extra cost? Like, are they expected to provide some food every now and then for a leader gathering? Is there anything like that that they should know ahead of time? Because the less surprises, probably the better, I would guess. So, and the other dynamic is if everybody's successful and everything grows, then the reality is all that changes. Things get more involved. And so you really kind of have to be reevaluating as you go. And people probably need to have the freedom to kind of reevaluate their involvement based on life, based on the growth of the area. What we experienced was we started out with an area that had a budget of $160,000, and we had about 40 leaders, and we had about 7 ministries. And before we knew it, we had an area with a $500,000 budget that had over 100 leaders, and we had 15 going on 16 ministries. And so the same committee person that was saying yes to this was now under the weight of this, okay? And so it's really important that we're thinking through on behalf of all of you, you know, we've got to have some of this thought through because we're all believing for a miracle that we're going to see growth. So what do you think is the best ways to lose a committee person?
How we do nothing.
To not use them.
Okay, so number one is don't use them. Okay? And that probably goes back to the roles thing, right? Of knowing why am I asking this person to come on board, okay? And I'm not going to micromanage them. I'm going to let them run with good supervision. But the reality is I think if you don't use them you lose them. If you abuse them, you lose them. And if you micromanage them, oftentimes you lose them. So there are some trap doors when we think about, you know, what we're doing with our committee people, and it's true probably for any management, I would guess, you know, that anybody that we're leading, that's going to be true. But I think the number one is don't use them, you're going to lose them. And so that's again pointing back to what are our needs, what are our roles, okay, and then also don't abuse them. Are we really working to try to kind of foster growth, and many hands make light work is what they say, you know, so how do we create space for more people to enter into the funnel? So if you picture that funnel, you know, are we getting more people there at the top of the funnel, and then people are kind of shaken down into those committee roles? And only you know your area dynamics, so you kind of know what the opportunity there is. Okay, we're almost done here. Best way to lose, don't use or abuse, don't micromanage. Jeff's going to share a little bit about strengths and making sure that people are working in the context of their strengths, so I'm not going to comment on that. Making sure that we have a shared vision, and I think making sure that we're celebrating is really important too. I think when you're a group of people working towards something, you need to reiterate the mission and the vision, you know, over and over and over again. It needs to be really simple. It needs to be in front of people. But I also really believe that celebration is important, and that oftentimes we get so bogged down with the work of committee that we don't step back and celebrate, you know, and hear the stories and get that in front of people. And so that's a little bit of where I want to end, is that we need to appeal to the heart, not just the head. You know, the head being the roles and the expectations and the work and all that stuff, but the heart, you know, how do you do that? How do you really keep committee people deeply engaged in ministry and deeply engaged in their part of the ministry? How do you all do that? How do you keep it kind of in their heart and not just in their head?
We have to tell the stories.
Okay, so how do we do that?
Newsletters,
Okay,
meet with them,
okay,
tell them what's going on.
okay, great. Do you have kids or leaders come to committee meetings and share about what they're doing? You know, and maybe they need to change the kid's name, maybe they don't, I don't know, but consistently having leaders in front of your committee sharing what's actually happening.
It's been 3 years, but we've done it.
Yeah, okay.
It was that bad, huh?
Taking a note, right?
So the reality is when you do that, you're not only encouraging the committee, you're building up a leader. And if you can have a leader and a kid come, you're also building up the kid. You know, there's something there's great stuff happening there. Anytime a kid is sharing their story, anytime a leader is sharing what's happening, that's going to be encouraging to the committee. So you can build that in. That can take 15 minutes of a meeting. You know, and I'll tell you, committees just come alive when they get that on a consistent basis. Anything else that you do? What do you think's really going to get their hearts connected to the ministry? We're talking about committee people. What?
They're gonna see it.
Okay, so they need to see it, right?
Yeah.
How can committees see the ministry happening? We shared one. Okay, they share a story. A kid comes to a committee meeting, a leader. How else?
Visit club.
Visit club. Okay.
Host team meetings.
Okay, host team meetings. What else?
Those campaigners.
Host campaigners. Anything else? Adult guests. We have this incredible adult guest program. It could even be adult guests at a weekend camp. You know, it doesn't necessarily have to be a week-long camp. It could be half of a week-long camp, or it could be just a weekend, or you know, a snow camp or a winter camp. There could be ways to get people in front of camping that doesn't cost them a whole week of their summer.
Right.
But you would love to have them there for a week of the summer. Okay, that would be a great thing to do. Anything else?
We identified a need that our leaders are going crazy on Tuesdays with class and everything, and they don't have time to eat dinner, so they bring dinner and we eat it in the club room before.
Love it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they loved it.
And a great place for people to help.
Yeah.
You know, and kind of come in and help. You bring the cookies, I'll bring the salad, you bring the drinks, we're gonna do this together. I mean, there's all sorts of ways.
We've actually we've had committee members adopt clubs.
Love it.
So the
Yep.
committees are going out to the clubs and providing that support to the leaders and meeting the kids in club.
Okay, so I love that you said that. Inside this packet, I'm just gonna share a couple ideas here and then I'm gonna be done, and Jeff and Lily got it, is there's actually an old couple job descriptions for what we called Whatcom County Young Life's life support captains and life support teams. These are what I mean by life support, they were young life support. So every one of our teams had a support team around them, and each one of those that life support team had a role, and they had a captain. And oftentimes that captain also was on our committee. Not always, but a lot of the times. And we really introduced it first and foremost in the context of our committee. And really what it was knitting committee people to a specific team of leaders that were doing ministry in their community. Okay, now sometimes people would cross over borders or whatever, and they would grow that support team around their school. So if I'm on committee and I'm close to South High School, well, I might be the captain for the life support team around South, and we have all these things that we're trying to do, but this is the school that's nearest and dearest to my heart. And so I'm going to invite all these other families, all these other friends, all these other people to join me in this effort. Now, when it comes time to have the banquet, we're actually going to have the opportunity to fill 10 tables from South, because I've got all these people that know and love the leaders, and they know the kids, and they've been involved in the ministry. And some of those people might also come on committee eventually. But I do know they're praying for the ministry, they're caring for the leaders, they're providing meals. It's not all on my back. I'm just kind of using my relationships and my passion for that high school, and it's very much like what you're describing. We saw tremendous success with that. The other thing that we offered, because we did have a lot of college-age leaders, is we offered an optional mentoring thing where we didn't want them to have another area director. We wanted them to be mentored in life and their spirituality. We wanted somebody to be praying for them and asking them questions, and really somebody who was older than them, and it was totally optional. If you didn't have a mentor or somebody like that in your life, we would actually provide somebody from the community for you. Again, great way to get people in the door. We had adults in the community that had lived life, were very healthy. They didn't want to be leaders, they weren't ready to be on committee, maybe they were donors, maybe they weren't. And they began to meet with one of our leaders who wanted that for 90 minutes every couple weeks. And I'll tell you, some of those people ended up becoming the godparents of some of our leaders' children. I mean, the relationships still go on to this day. They were very deep and very strong. What we didn't do is we didn't have them become their area director. We didn't have them talk about ministry and the practice of ministry. It was really more focused on life and spirituality and praying for the ministry and things like that. So we did think, there could be a couple little trapdoors in that one that we wanted to avoid because we didn't want there to be kind of conflicts. The area director's saying this and the mentor's saying this. So we really said, support the person who's doing the ministry, but don't talk too much about the ministry, because that's really the role of the area director or the team leader. But that was just one other way that we were able to connect a lot of our committee people and a lot of people in the community with leaders, and their hearts for the ministry grew because they found a way that they could intersect, that they could actually be involved and supported. So, the life support group I think is a great way to develop community and to get people in the door. And then the other thing I would say is, here's a way that you can knit your committee folks to leaders and to ministry. Two last ideas. One is there's a very simplistic sheet here, which was our year-long calendar. And one of the things you're going to see here, and I'm not saying you have to do this, you might integrate one of these things or none of these things or all of these things, but what we did is there were 4 times throughout the year that we made sure that our committee and our leadership was together. And one of the motivators behind that was because we found that committee were not showing up to all of our committee meetings, and leaders weren't showing up to all of our leadership meetings, but when we knit them together, these 4 times, they never missed. They loved each other. Committee folks want to be places where they're useful. They don't tend to just kind of hang out with leaders, and they kind of want to have an excuse, So if you have to bring the casserole, you're going to show up, and you're going to feel like you're contributing, and you're going to enter in. And so what we did is we had a kickoff retreat or a kickoff day. We had a Christmas party where the area would provide a certain portion of the meal, the committee would provide a certain portion. The leaders didn't have to do anything. But we had it all worked out so it was financially doable. Everybody agreed on how we were doing what we were doing. But everybody showed up and we had a big party. And we had a white elephant gift exchange and worship. And kids were welcome, so families were there, and it was a highlight. And so it was the kickoff retreat, it was the Christmas party. We had a night in like April or March, you'll see, it might be a little bit later, that was our all county or all area prayer night. That was just for leaders and committee. And we actually would encourage people to fast during the day if they wanted. We would break the fast with dessert after the meeting. The committee would bring the dessert. We would have great worship. We would pray over the whole area. We would have opportunity for people to receive prayer there. It was a really powerful night. We would do it every year. Nobody would miss. Okay, they always wanted to be together. And then finally, at the end of the year, we had our end of the year picnic. Again, committee are involved. Leaders are showing up. All these relationships is formed. We're saying hello to new people. We're saying goodbye to people that are leaving. We're giving gifts. We're a family. Okay? So we're getting together 4 times a year to try to foster family and to foster deep connections, and we're encouraging people to bring others with them. You know? And the reality is it was a blast. We never felt like we were pulling teeth. Everybody was excited to own those things and do those things. So my point is, any way you can knit your committee to your leaders and to the direct ministry, you're going to have growth and you're going to have positive things come, and they're not going to lose their passion. And there's going to be all sorts of wonderful ideas and opportunities that flow out of that. So I know that might sound overwhelming, but those 4 events, nobody ever complained about. There wasn't one committee person who said, oh my gosh, you guys are asking way too much of us. They were so delighted to show up, and they were so delighted to be involved. So I guess I give that to you because I just want to make sure that you can see this is kind of how we did that. And then the last thing is we did a committee, our retreat in the fall, when we started off for many years, before we actually kind of condensed it for financial reasons, we actually knit together we would start with a team leader retreat, and then our committee would show up with food for dinner with our team leaders. And then we had 2 tracks running at the same time, because all of our leaders would then show up, and for the rest of the weekend we had a committee track and a leader track, and we would share meals and we would share worship and we would share keynote speaking, but we would break out for the specifics that the committee needed to talk about or the leaders needed to talk about. And again, nobody missed, and everybody was excited to be there, and it was phenomenal. Now, eventually we had to adapt a little bit, but we still tried to integrate wherever we possibly could. So I would just say maybe that's the principle, is wherever you can, try to integrate those 2, because that will fuel the passion of your committee. You won't have people missing. I mean, they will fall in love with leaders, they will fall in love with the ministry, you won't be able to keep them away. And that's, at least that's what we experienced. Anyway, I'm gonna hand the baton to Jeff and Lily. So
Let's give it up for Jonathan.